Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. Today we're going to talk about a massive debate happening in fashion right now that is really important to the future of fashion. But before that, I want to say thank you so much for 5k subscribers. Thank you to everyone who's subscribed already. If you watch this channel and you haven't subscribed yet, then please consider doing so. It means the world to me. But anyway, let's get into the video because we have a lot to discuss. Who pays for sustainability? This is a question that the industry has been asking itself for at least the last 10 years. And we still don't really have an answer. Every player in fashion thinks that someone else should be paying for it. It's gotten to the point where it's holding back sustainability's progress massively. For one thing, brands are desperate not to have to pay to upgrade their supply chains or foot the bill of new sustainability regulations in products or materials. They want to either pass off the cost to suppliers or the consumer, so it doesn't interfere with their bottom line. And there's been two recent incidents of this which kind of brought the debate back to the forefront that I want to take you through first. The first one, which I think people might get a bit more mad about, is Shein raising their prices. Now, this is kind of to do with this debate, but also kind of to do with their IPO. And not to worry, I'm putting out my video on that soon because it's looking more and more likely that they're going to announce. I know people are waiting for it. But a recent article revealed that they'd hiked up their prices by as much as 28% for the same cheap quality clothing that they're desperate to sell to you. And experts agree that at least part of this is to do with swallowing the cost of new legislation like France's fast fashion bill, which will tax their use of polyester. They're pushing that cost onto their consumers. So you're paying more for the same quality clothing versus Shein taking a dip in their profits to make sure that you're getting those same prices that everyone loves for the clothing they're offering. And it's very sneaky, and like I said, likely to upset a lot of people considering Shein is seen as an affordable brand. And I'm putting affordable in air quotes because I spoke about this in my last video and I highly recommend you watch it. So people who analysed Shein's prices over the past however many months to find this change found that some items have been hiked up by over a third, hoping to boost their revenue for the planned IPO and also obviously to increase their profits for the incoming legislation. The second recent incident that brought back the who pays for sustainability debate was a press release from H&M that I stumbled upon almost by accident. So if you were to just quickly glance at this press release, I don't think you would have seen what I saw when I deep dived into it. Their initial headline speaks about how they, along with some other brands, are promising to make progress to decarbonize the supply chain by working directly with suppliers. From this headline, you may be forgiven for believing that H&M was going to be putting money directly into decarbonization technology, buying it outright for their suppliers or investing with suppliers on it. And that's very intentional. It wasn't until I scrolled 2/3 through the press release that I found what I assumed would be hidden in the fine print. It turns out, instead of directly investing in the supply chain technology, H&M are offering a loan for suppliers so they can invest in decarbonization. The reason they're offering this is because they say they can give these suppliers a better interest loan than traditional banks. And whilst that may help, it also puts the whole pressure of decarbonizing on the suppliers. They're going to have to pay these brands back in installments for supply chain infrastructure that these brands are directly going to be benefiting from, since they can write off that decarbonization in their climate commitments. When it comes to fashion supply chains, often there's only small or medium-sized factories that don't have a lot of capital to spend towards decarbonization. And this is made worse by the way our fashion industry allows brands to dip in and out of factories without committing to them, without investing in some way. So they can't have reliable funds to make that investment. It's a leap in the dark for them. Although I just gave you two really recent examples, the idea brands have been putting out that they shouldn't be the ones to pay for sustainability goes way back. Luxury fashion is an example of how this has always been the case. Luxury fashion has a perception of being more sustainable, certainly more sustainable than fast fashion. And that's something that those brands really want us to believe. They hammer it home. There was a very well-known interview in the industry where Antoine Arnault said that luxury is sustainable by nature and made a clear distinction between luxury fashion sectors and fast fashion. Certainly, that's what they've been trying to make us believe so that we pay for these higher price tags on luxury items. But recently, there's been headlines about how luxury fashion houses have been violating wage laws. And even before that, there was rumblings about how luxury fashion doesn't have very ethical supply chains. In fact, according to Good On You, 75% of the luxury brands they'd reviewed come into their two worst categories. Just this week, a Milan court started investigating into LVMH's supply chain after it was found out that some of their subcontractors had exploited workers. And in April, the same court had found similar evidence on Armani's supply chain. It completely breaks down the idea that with luxury fashion, you're paying for sustainability. Since even though brands are raking in profits from those raised prices, it's not trickling down to their supply chains or to their workers. And if luxury fashion, with its insane prices, hasn't taken responsibility for paying for sustainability, then there's almost no hope for fast fashion right now.
Editing right now, but I wanted to make this point about how brands have always been trying to push sustainability onto consumers, even when what they're selling is not sustainable, only perceived sustainable. And the idea that came into my head was that one lawsuit where someone was suing H&M for their conscious collection, saying that the sustainable products they were selling with this collection were not actually more sustainable. And the fact that they had to pay a premium for these items was misleading. If I remember rightly, they actually won the case, and it set a whole precedent for brands in how they can market their conscious collections, and eventually led to the downfall of the conscious collections. But it just gets me thinking that if brands are comfortable with making us pay a premium for sustainable products that are not more sustainable than the other collection, and we're only getting the idea of sustainability, then of course we're going to see brands pushing the prices up on products now that sustainability is a given rather than just something they're trying to sell to us. And I'm not sure how consumers are going to react, given that most of us are not in good financial straits right now, and the idea of paying for fashion to clean itself up will probably grate a lot.
The consequences of brands not wanting to pay for sustainability is a massive lack of progress. We've been discussing sustainable fashion for over a decade now, maybe 2 decades, and yet it feels like almost nothing has been actually put into action. Brands are happy to speak about the commitments they want to make, but when it comes to actually implementing them, there's a real block. We've seen this time and time again when it comes to new ventures in sustainable fashion and how quickly they crumble. Like with Renewacell, that recycling factory that had to close after lack of industry investment, or with a few biomaterials that even almost made it to production but couldn't raise enough capital to get it through that final push. Thankfully, it may be that things start to move on now that sustainability is becoming a requirement rather than a nice to have or just a perceived state, as in the case of luxury fashion. Even without the incoming sustainability legislation, the fashion industry is fighting a battle against climate change and losing. The industry itself stands to lose tens of billions of dollars in missed earnings by the end of the decade if it doesn't make its supply chains more resilient to climate change events like flooding or heat waves. So what are some of the investments that do need to happen, either by brands or by suppliers or between both of them? It desperately needs to invest in infrastructure. Things like decarbonisation, renewable energy, recycling materials so they're ready to go back into production after being used are all steps that will require expensive technology. In fact, decarbonising the industry is expected to take $1 trillion. Another thing is investing in better quality materials or paying the penalty if they continue to use worse quality materials like polyester. When we say better quality materials, we not only mean organic cotton over regular cotton, but also transparency through the supply chain. It could also mean investing in new materials like biomaterials like cactus leather or any of the other ones that I mentioned in my biomaterials video. Another thing for them to invest in is ESG compliance. Brands will have to employ or educate existing staff about the new sustainability requirements from supply chain to advertising, or risk paying a fine if they don't hit that sustainability legislation or if they accidentally greenwash in the media. Something else they may need to invest in is their workers. Brands currently rely on outsourcing a lot of their production where they don't have a real oversight into how much people are being paid. But now that transparency is being demanded by legislation, they'll have to directly understand how much they're paying and make sure that's a living wage. They may also have to invest in services in order to convince consumers that they're doing what they can. This might be things like offering repairs on their clothing or hosting community events like swap shops that promote circular fashion. One of the brands I want to quickly talk about, which I think is a really good example of understanding what brands could be doing and why it might cost so much to be doing this, is Garni. If you don't know, I've spoken about this a lot on my channel. Garni have a sustainable Instagram page where they talk about everything they're doing as a brand called Garni Lab. And just taking a quick scroll through their feed, you could begin to understand where investment might be needed if a brand were to follow in their footsteps. One example I wanted to give as a kind of hope for the future is a Pakistani denim manufacturer, Artistic Milliners. They partnered with a couple of well-known brands to create the Organic Cotton Project. This was basically a co-financing model where the supplier put in some money and brands put in some money by guaranteeing that they would purchase pre-agreed volumes and pay a price premium for this certified sustainable cotton, which would help cover the cost to farmers who had to grow this sustainable cotton and invest in infrastructure there. One caveat I do want to point out though is that Artistic Milliners is one of the larger manufacturers and it already had access to credit to invest in this scheme versus some smaller companies might not have been able to do so. It also found that most brands were unwilling to take to the scheme because they had to commit to volumes despite the uneasiness of the current fashion market and also pay a premium for the product. And it turns out that Artistic Milliners had to pay for about 60% of this venture. So although it worked out happily in the end and it's on track to do well and create a case study for how brands could be financing with suppliers, it also wasn't the best outcome. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts on the who pays for sustainability debate. I haven't even touched on consumers and how we might be offloaded a lot of the costs. So let's continue the discussion in the comments below. And I hope you have a lovely week. I'll speak to you really soon. Bye.